Well, Dan Blumenthal is the Director of Asian Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, where he focuses on East Asian security issues and Sino-American relations. And Meredith Sumpter is Director of Asia at the Eurasia Group. They both join us from our two Washington studios. Thank you both, Dan and Meredith, for joining us here on the program. I'll start with you, Meredith. We were just hearing there in our piece from a retired colonel. The U.S. is playing with fire, but China has fire too. So the gloves are really off now, aren't they?
Well, certainly the risks of escalation are significant, but certainly not inevitable. It's still early days in the U.S.-China relationship under President Trump.
Well, we're hearing a lot of very fiery language coming out of the Trump administration before he was inaugurated and in the last few days as well.
That's very true. Excuse me. President Trump has come to the conclusion that China has been playing by unfair rules, and he's looking to bring a variety of tools to the table to try to push China to improve market access for U.S. firms and to rebalance a trade relationship that he says has been unfair for too long. The issue here is that the nature of trade ties between the U.S. and China have considerable significance for both the U.S. economy and China's economy, as well as the global economy. And so
let's bring Dan into this, because we are slightly in a bit of an unpredictable and potentially dangerous time.
Well, it's certainly unpredictable in the sense that the United States has elected an outsider, someone who wasn't in politics and has succeeded in business and in negotiations. I don't know that it's dangerous. We're beginning to see President Trump and his team think through the policies that would actually address the issues that so many Americans in both parties feel need to be addressed with respect to Chinese economic malfeasance, subsidies, intellectual property theft, cyber issues.
You don't think it's potentially dangerous that Sean Spicer would make the position quite clear and say they'd use force to defend their interests, and then we have a very defiant China hitting back?
Well, China's been very clear that it'll use force and has been using force to press its interests. I don't think there's anything new about that. I think that both President Obama and the new team of President Trump are saying exactly what needs to be said, which is that we have interests in the South China Sea, and we also will defend them, just like China has been doing.
The first year, Meredith, is incredibly important, though, isn't it, for setting the tone of the relationship and also the relationship between the two leaders?
Absolutely, and we're going from what has been a fairly constructive relationship over the past several U.S. administrations to one that is much more combative. And so that is something that is certainly going to be a rough path for U.S.-China relations, if not the first year, then the first 2 years. Now, China has seen this before, both with the Reagan administration and the Clinton administration. Both administrations came to the table looking to try different things to pressure China and to shape Chinese behavior. And in both cases, they came out pretty strong at the forefront, only to find that using an only carrots approach really was not that effective in shaping Chinese behavior.
China has already said, in terms of the One China policy, for example, it's non-negotiable. Dan, how do you think that they're likely to react if the Trump administration continues to provoke them in this way?
Well, China's been very provocative itself, and so China's going to have to get used to the United States pushing back. But it's not true to say the last 8 years have been very conflictual with China under President Obama as well. I think the presumption that all of a sudden things are taking a downturn isn't right. Things have been tense with China, and President Trump is going to be looking both to continue the competition with China, because we have to, but also look for new areas of cooperation which are never discussed, such as energy cooperation, for example.
Do you agree with that, Meredith, that it actually was always already going on a downward spiral, and actually this is nothing different or new?
I would say that the administration of President Obama, as well as the prior administrations to him, have been pretty effective in having a constructive relationship with a rising China. And if you think about this historically, that's no small feat. China is now the second largest power in the world, and as it continues to rise, it will pursue its interests. And so the change here is really you have a very strong leader in Xi Jinping who is being much more assertive about how he is going about securing China's interests. Now, President Trump is right to push back, but the question is, what is the most effective approach that will not put the U.S. economy itself at risk? And at the end of the day, whether you're questioning the one China policy or making risky assessments about what the U.S. will do to push back on South China Sea claims, you have to be careful about mixing trade tactics with questions of national sovereignty and security.
Dan, do you agree with that?
I do. President Obama, of course, was pushing back very hard in the South China Sea, very strong military exercises and freedom of navigation exercises that China didn't like, new arrangements and agreements around China's periphery that they didn't like. So I don't think we can sit here and say that relations were good with China. But we always have to find a balance between areas of cooperation and areas of competition, and President Trump will have to do so as well.
On the issue of the one China policy, I mean, the only loser in that can only be Taiwan.
Well, I disagree with that very much. I think that, again, we have to go back and look at the moment President Tsai was elected, the leader of Taiwan. President Xi began to pressure and coerce her and try to undermine her presidency. This didn't start with our election. This started with her election. And Taiwan is not in a good situation. It's being coerced. It's being isolated. And under the rubric of the one China policy, there is so much more that we are able to do to help Taiwan not be isolated and coerced.
So do you think that President Trump wants to help and assist Taiwan?
Yes, I do. I really do. I think that they'll be looking at things
because already from this sort of combative approach and language, you know, certain countries have pushed back. Nigeria, for example, has asked to close its representative office in its capital, so it's backfired on Taiwan.
Well, a lot of this, as I said, began when President Tsai was elected the president of Taiwan. China was on a plan to coerce, isolate her. They don't like her party, and so a lot of this was underway beforehand. So China was going to push Taiwan around no matter what. The question is, for any U.S. president, is what are we going to do in response in accord with our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act and the 6 assurances? And there's a lot we can do to help Taiwan under the rubric of the one China policy.
Dan, Meredith, still lots to talk about. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both for joining us on the program.